My cheating wife gave me an STD. My wife and I have been married for about 7 years now and have had what I thought was a good relationship. We were close physically and emotionally and never had any serious marital issues during the last 9 years. 2 dating, 7 married. Jessica went on a business trip for work that was only 4 days long in an out-of-state location. This was something that was planned by the company on a yearly basis, and I wasn't surprised by the trip, nor had any concerns about it. I travel a few times a year for my own job. During the business trip, Jessica and I communicated like normal except for the first night due to the obligatory company dinner. That night, Jessica went phone, text, silent starting around her evening. I chalked that up to being busy with the company dinner. The next few days, she was very active, sending me texts and asking for video chat at night and mornings. On the last evening she was away, I was looking for Jessica's tablet, remembering my wife had taken mine because it was newer and larger for the shows she liked while in the hotel room. I searched around until I found it and started browsing the internet while relaxing for the evening. As you can probably already guess, her phone and Facebook were attached to her tablet, and a text popped up from a number I didn't recognize. The text made me uncomfortable since it seemed to be a guy, and he was saying it was great to finally meet her, and that she was as hot in person as he had hoped. As I was sitting there looking at the message, my wife replied non-committal, saying she was packing for her early morning flight. When Jessica entered the house the next day, she was extremely happy to see me and jumped my bones in the front room. Over the next couple of weeks, she was affectionate and initiated with me every night. This was out of character, but who was I to complain? Things settled back to normal, but Jessica seemed to be very focused on our relationship and going out together. It was like we were dating again. After another week or so, I noticed that I was having some discomfort when urinating and what appeared to be discharge in my underwear. Being a guy, we constantly handle ourselves when peeing, etc., so I knew something was wrong. Later that day, I brought it up to Jessica that we'd need to pause our physical activity because I had what I thought to be a yeast infection. I asked her if she had any issues with yeast infections recently, and she said no. I did the home remedy of drinking a lot of water and using a popular OTC medication. The infection persisted, so I decided to go in and see my doctor. I didn't make a big deal of it with Jessica because it was a bit embarrassing. Needless to say, a few days later, when I was able to get in front of my PCP, he looked at my symptoms and commented that it was more likely something other than a simple yeast infection. My doctor collected blood, urine, and discharge samples. When I asked my doctor what he thought it was, he paused, looked me directly in the eye, and said his best guess was that I had picked up an STD. He told me that the lab work would be back in a day or so, and that he'd send me the prescription to my pharmacy once he knew what we were dealing with. He did ask me if my wife and I were physically active with each other, to which I said yes. He asked if she was showing any symptoms. I told him none that she told me about. He then told me it was common for women to show fewer symptoms or no symptoms at all with some infections. Apparently, the stunned look on my face was obvious, and he recommended that we wait and see how the lab tests come back before worrying about it. When I got home, I was careful not to mention anything about the doctor's visit to Jessica, but I was not happy, and she noticed. After dinner, Jessica asked if I wanted to watch some TV, but I was too distracted, so I just told her that I was going to read and go to bed early. There must have been something in my demeanor because she asked me if I was okay. I just blew it off and went into the office, closed the door, and started looking into STDs on the internet, particularly how they are most commonly transmitted, and symptoms, etc. Some things you shouldn't have to research. I ended up going to bed after Jessica was already asleep. The next morning, I slept in because I had problems sleeping. My mind was all over the place thinking about Jessica and how this could have happened. Jessica could tell something was going on and started asking me if everything was okay again. I broke down and told her that I had gone to see the doctor and that I was waiting for the test results. Jessica told me not to worry and that everything would be okay. Yeast infections would go away. Yeah, I decided not to tell her what the doctor said. Later that day, I received a message through the app on my phone that I used to track prescriptions and messages with my doctor. There was a message from him saying that the lab tests showed I had G, and that he had sent in a prescription to my pharmacy for me to take. He also gave me the option to come back into the office and just get a shot if I wanted to take that route. I opted for the shot since I really wanted this gone as soon as possible. The doctor made it clear to me that Jessica would be the only way I could have gotten this, if I had not had any other partners. He told me that I would need to tell her to get tested and treated. They printed out the lab results for me, and I headed home. When I got home, Jessica met me at the door and asked how the visit went and what the doctor said. I looked her in the eyes, handed her the lab results, and walked away. As I was walking to the office, I told her she would need to talk to her doctor and get treated. As I closed the door, I could hear her say, "What?" Then she came storming into the office asking what this test was. I turned on her, got in her face, and yelled, "You gave me gonorrhea! Can't you read?" In shock, she took a step back, stuttering, "What are you talking about?" I bluntly told her that whoever she had cheated on me with had given her an STD that she came home and shared with me. I yelled at her to go to her doctor and get tested. As soon as I said it, she started backing up down the hall, saying, "No, no, no!" Then she turned and ran to our bedroom. She had locked herself in the bathroom and was bawling and talking to herself, mumbling some nonsense about how this couldn't be happening. I packed a bunch of my clothes into a duffel bag, grabbed my work stuff, and left the house. I called my best friend and told him what was going on, so he invited me to come to his house and crash as long as I needed. It didn't take too long before Jessica was spamming me with text messages and phone calls, which I ignored. That night, I sent a single text to her saying that I would not be talking with her again until she got tested and treated. I spent the week at my friend's house. He and his wife were very supportive after the initial shock wore off. I contacted my boss at work, explained the basics of what was happening, and he told me to take off as much time as needed. A week or so later, I returned home to find Jessica a complete mess. Jessica looked like she had not slept much and had not eaten all week. She was sitting on the couch when I walked in and jumped to her feet as soon as I entered. She started crying, came over to me, tried to hug me, said she was sorry, and begged for forgiveness. I ignored her and walked away as soon as I was able to remove her death grip from me. She followed me to the bedroom, begging me to talk. I laid down on the bed and couldn't help crying. She got on the bed, but I wouldn't let her touch me. I asked her if she had been tested. She said yes in a whisper that was hard to hear. I asked her if she got treated, and she said yes, she got a shot for gonorrhea. I rolled onto my side, facing away from her, and she dropped the bombshell. She told me that her test also came back positive for herpes. I looked at her and she visibly flinched. I immediately sent an in-app message to my doctor asking if my test checked for herpes. I messaged him that my wife was positive for both G and H. My doctor messaged me back a while later, saying that herpes was part of the lab panel, and that I was negative, but told me he would schedule me back in a couple of weeks for a retest to be sure. Over the next couple of days, when I was able to fight my emotions back, Jessica and I had a talk about her infidelity. She admitted that she'd had a one-night stand with a guy from work at the company off-site. She cried the entire time she was telling me this. She said that when she contacted him, he had admitted to being H positive but claimed that he was not having an active outbreak or some crap, so he tried to claim innocence. Jessica claims it must have been him since it was her first and only indiscretion. I'm not a fool, and I don't believe her. She offered to let me look at her phone, but again, I'm sure she would have cleaned up any incriminating conversations. She kept begging me to forgive her and that she'd make it up to me. I wasn't interested in talking to her right now, because she was in denial then deal-making mode. It took another week or so of talking before I finally just asked her calmly what she would do if our roles were reversed. If I had gone on a trip, had sex with a coworker, then came home and given her a disease that she had to deal with for weeks before getting treated. I asked her, would you forgive me? Would she ever trust me again? Would she ever be okay with having intercourse with me again? Could she just set this aside and move on with our marriage like nothing had happened? After sitting there for a few minutes staring at the table, she shook her head and sobbed, "Probably not." She finally had a look of understanding. I told her that if we stayed together every single time she left the house without me, I would be wondering if she was heading off to have another affair. Whenever she texted someone, I would think it would be with her AP. I asked her if that was the relationship that she thought I deserved. She started crying again and said, "No." Even after walking her through the logic, she still pleaded with me to forgive her. Then I asked her, "Do you expect me to ever make love to you again, knowing it would probably be a matter of time before she gave me herpes?" This sent her over the edge into hysterical bawling. It was probably not a fair question, but it was definitely on my mind. And to be clear, I don't care if anyone thinks that was mean. You were not in my shoes. I treated her like my soulmate, and she threw away 9 years for a bad lay with a topping of STD. Jessica and I were divorced months later. She never gave me a specific reason why she cheated, just a vague comment about how the guy treated her like a princess. She recognized that he was just after her body, and she felt enough shame for what she had done that she stopped talking to him until she had to ask about the STD. We came to an agreement before filing that gave us a fair division of assets, and she agreed that she did not deserve any alimony. Since we had no kids, there wasn't anything more difficult to resolve. The hardest part was we had just started trying for our first. Jessica and I started out as friends before we dated and ultimately married. She has relentlessly kept up communication and worked hard to rebuild a friendship. We still have the same group of friends that we hang out with. Unlike most people I read about, we never went nuclear, forcing our friends to choose. I am happy that Jessica came clean to everyone about her fling, and most of our friends tore into her about it. Yeah, kind of petty. At the end of the day, we still hang out, and hopefully I can put some of this hurt behind me. Neither of us has done any dating since our split. In my case, I'm just not prepared for it as my relationship nerve is still raw. I think, in Jessica's case, she has a long-term plan to win me back. Good luck to her on that. Anyway, that's my story. If anything comes up that's of interest, I'll send an update. I only post unique new content. Please like and subscribe.